and welcome back, and happy 4th of July. Nearly. And this year will be a turn up for the books, as not only is this the day celebrating the independence of the US of A, but it is also when a general election is going to be held in the UK. Yes, that's right, you Yankees, we're taking the date back. You lot wouldn't be here without us. And let that sink in as we take a look at one of America's greatest presidents, who is also related to one of the UK's best prime ministers, being 12 cousins once removed, as we take a look at Theodore Roosevelt. The life of the bull moose was one full of adventure and excitement. But what if I were to tell you that as a boy he crossed paths with another great president? We all know the story of Abraham Lincoln's assassination. The place, an opera house booth. The culprit, John Wilkes Booth. Lincoln's body was preserved and taken on tour across the country. Man, forget the Eras tour. This is how a celebrity tours the country. Ending up in New York on April 25th, 1865. Now looking at this photograph of the funeral procession, it looks like any other, albeit large and in memoriam of the president. But take a look at this house in particular. That house was owned by one Cornelius Van Schack Roosevelt, the grandfather of one Theodore Roosevelt. And who should be watching the procession go by at the window of this house? Why, only one future president looking at a deceased president, as he stood there with his brother Elliot. It makes you wonder what he was thinking at the time. I doubt he would have known he would one day be in the Oval Office himself, or did some of that presidential mojo pass from Lincoln to Roosevelt? Roosevelt trained at Harvard from 1876, graduating in 1880. From when he was young, his father had taught young Ted to take care of morals first, then health, and finally studies. Well, that explains a lot. Teddy soon enrolled at Columbia Law School, instead of pursuing the natural science career he at first aimed for. However, Theodore soon found, in his words, law to be too irrational. And Roosevelt soon found himself more embroiled in local politics, becoming a member of the 21st District Republicans Association, so he dropped out. See, even you can be president even if you're a dropout, as long as you're leaving university to go and do something and not just laying about. Before Roosevelt was the Reformist president, he was the Reformist commissioner of the New York Police Department, where his tough-on-crime stance took shape. Appointed commissioner in 1895, and only lasting in the job for 2 years. America was just coming out of the Gilded Age, a time of rapid industrialization that also created rampant poverty, crime and class division. The upper classes and police officers got off on bribes and offers from criminals, letting those innocents who were caught in the middle suffer. Basically, picture Gotham City and you have a full picture. And we even have a commissioner with a mighty moustache, so it still fits. Roosevelt's tough-on-crime stance and firm black-and-white worldview quickly went to work cleaning up the New York police. Texts such as the Lexile Commission gave details on how citizens were strong-armed, and business owners were beaten and imprisoned into giving their profits to the police. Roosevelt's main opposition was Thomas Burns, the chief of police, a connected and corrupt individual with deep pockets of blood money and a great deal of influence. Roosevelt was undaunted against this foe. To him, all he saw was a bully, a loud-mouthed and dirty-souled scoundrel whose only future was the inside of a prison cell. He sought to prosecute the menace and clean up the streets of America's worst city, and in some way he succeeded, as Burns resigned as chief. But the corruption did not just come from the top. It was a culture of sin that existed in the police force. So to understand the mindset of the average officer, he began walking the nightly beat, seeing the corruption of officers firsthand. Mass firings and reassignments soon followed. He soon found himself as a folk hero, like the noble sheriff, cleaning up the streets, and many political cartoons soon followed, immortalizing Roosevelt as this figure. And with a pedigree like that, it's no wonder Roosevelt became president. Except for one wrinkle, he didn't actually want to be president. His reformist policies did not cease for anything, not even during that time when the Spanish-American War broke out, and he formed the Rough Riders, becoming a national hero in the process, afterwards becoming governor of New York in 1898. His conservation efforts and reformist ideas ruffled many feathers, including Republican leader Mark Hanna and Thomas Platt, who pushed him into the nominee for vice president, thereby out of governorship and out of their hair, as if he lost, he may drop out of politics altogether, but if he won, he would have no power in the vice president role. Oh, if only. He was elected vice president with incumbent William McKinley. 6 months later in 1901, McKinley was shot, and Roosevelt was suddenly president of the United States at the youngest age at the time of 42 years old. Boy, did those politicians have egg on their face. You would not think that one of the most manly presidents to exist would play a role in the creation of one of the most well-known kids' toys. In November 1902, well-known outdoorsman Holt Collier was guiding the president on one of his hunting expeditions in the Mississippi Delta. Collier was known for having the largest kills of black bears under his belt, and it was just one of such black bears that the hunter stunned and cornered for the president to shoot. But Teddy refused, deeming it a dishonorable action to shoot an animal in such a state. Collier incidentally killed the bear himself. I mean, if the president is refusing to do something, I don't think that's an invitation. The story made it to New York in an editorial cartoon, whereupon a local sweet shop salesman and shop owner named Morris Mictum and his wife Rose made the now iconic bear, naming it Teddy's Bear, or as it is now known, the Teddy Bear, in the president's honor. Incidentally, the Teddy Bear has become the state's toy of Mississippi, with a new commemorative one being sold at the Mississippi Delta every year. As president, Roosevelt held an aggressive foreign policy, but he still recognized the need for peace, and that America, as one of the most powerful countries, needed to fill that role. He pushed for Japan and Russia to attend a peace talk in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in 1906 to end the Russo-Japanese War that had begun in 1904, also settling a dispute between France and Germany over the division of Morocco. For his efforts, Roosevelt became the first president to receive a Nobel Peace Prize. Now, Roosevelt was not always the rugged and ready-to-go manly man that he grew into. As a child, he was actually quite sickly, being asthmatic and frail. Largely, he was homeschooled and bullied for his frailty. But Ted did not take this all lying down. No. He instead worked on himself, trained hard, and eventually became an Iron Man. Or a bull moose. Having a tight regime of exercise and beginning a hobby of boxing, including while at Harvard, where in 1857 he entered tournaments where his ability to take a punch and his fierceness made up for his lack of skill. He even continued his boxing into the White House, where he even boxed members of government and military men, which was when he became inflicted with a damaged cornea in a match with Colonel Daniel T. Moore. But being the bull moose, he refused to stop his pastime of strapping on gloves until doctors had no choice but to intervene and put a ban on him from boxing ever again. Of course, this left Teddy quite dejected for about 10 seconds until he switched to jiu-jitsu instead. This is probably the story that most people know most well, for good reason. Just before one of his speeches, Roosevelt was shot. I know, another president getting shot. Hopefully that will be the last one. In 1912, so after Roosevelt was president, John Schrank tried to assassinate Roosevelt in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Schrank had apparently tried to shoot Roosevelt after the ghost of William McKinley had come to him and told him to avenge his death, pointing to a picture of the former president. Okay, thankfully the shot was not fatal, as the bullet only landed in his chest after going through his steel eyeglass case and his 50-page speech. And thanks to Teddy Roosevelt being an avid hunter, he knew that where he was shot was not a vital area, and it did not hit his lung as he was not coughing up blood. And so he got right back up and commenced his speech, stating that yes, he had been shot, but it takes more than that to stop a bull moose. Whereupon he then finished his 50-minute speech with great gusto, only to then receive medical attention. It turned out the bullet had lodged itself into the chest muscle, but it was concluded that it would be safer to leave the bullet in than to take it out, which is why the bullet stayed for the rest of Roosevelt's life. Oh, and if you're wondering what happened to Schrank, there were those that called for his execution, but Roosevelt himself ordered that no harm was to come to the man, and then he would be turned straight to the police. He was committed to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane in 1914, where he eventually died from pneumonia in September 1943. Imagine shooting a president only for him to get right back up and carry on. Because that was Theodore Roosevelt's legacy. A legacy of grit and determination. Refusing to give up whether the way seemed too treacherous, or whether allies were limited. With the odds stacked against him, and in a tidal wave of deceit and treachery against those who fought to conspire against him, and even facing down the barrel of a gun, Roosevelt never blinked. He still strived for a greater nobility, to fight for justice at a time when it was needed most. Not just for the city he was born in, but for a nation he swore to lead. From Lionheart to the bull moose. I wonder what historical figure we'll be looking at next time. Well, I'm sure we'll find out when we get there, but until then, thank you all for watching this week's video, and until next time everyone, peace be with you.